What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another sit-down video. I am Jeff Nadu. We're here live. What are we on? What is this, a Wednesday? Doing a little live stream, and I got a great guest for you tonight. I've really gotten to know this guy the last couple of days, and we found out some really interesting stuff about each other, I think, and speaking. But I love his channel. I came across the Black Handprint Mafia. RJ Rogers, his name, and he's a great historian, wrote some books. And we talked last night about his book, and I felt like saying, why don't we just come on? What did we say, RJ, when we were talking on the phone? It was like, damn, I wish we could record this phone call, right?
No, how long did we talk for? Like 3 hours?
About 3 hours. Yeah, it was crazy. Luckily, I think we both had nights where it was just like we didn't have a lot to do. And yeah, you look down and it's like 2 hours and 53 minutes later, and it's like, wow, what a great phone call. But I think I like your channel as well because you get more into like the theory and the thinking behind like, why was the mob created? Why did certain people become mobsters? Why did some mobsters fail and some obviously have these like long successful careers? I mean, it's rare that we find a mobster that had a really, really successful career. But I felt like having you come on, and we also found out we live in the same town. What are the chances of that in America, a country with 330 million people? We happen to live in the same town. You mentioned many places that I know of. RJ Roger, Black Handprint Mafia. How you doing, my friend?
I'm great. And that was when I sent you, when you emailed me and I responded and I said, hey, give me a call. And I sent you my phone number. And I don't answer phone calls from people if I don't know who it is.
Yeah.
So I see the phone ringing and it's the same area code. And I said, well, that can't be him. So I didn't answer. If you remember, I didn't answer.
You didn't. It rang for a while.
Yeah. And then I got your voicemail. And I'm like, so the minute I got on the phone, I said, and you told me where you live and everything. I said, bro, we're like 10 minutes apart. five minutes apart.
It's like, and again, this is such a, like, I know, we almost want to think that this is a huge genre of people doing this, but it's really not. There's not that many people doing it. It's just kind of random that we stumbled across each other. But so tell people a little bit about you, your channel, really kind of why you're in this space. You have kind of an interesting kind of background, and I think you just kind of have a passion for it, kind of like I do, and I think a lot of other people do.
So for me, I've been into this stuff my whole life. Both my parents were like just mob movie junkies, and so they always watched them all the time. And this is back when I grew up in poverty and things like that. We didn't have anything, so we had like the old VCR, the tracking knob, and things like that. And they would watch these old mob movies, and they would put them on, and we didn't have cable and things like that. So I just would watch these mob movies on repeat. I would watch it, rewind the whole tape, watch it again.
Do you remember the first one you watched?
I was thinking about that. It was probably The Godfather. If I'm being honest, it was, if I had to remember. But the first one, and it's not an overly recognized movie, but the first one that really grabbed me was one called Witness to the Mob. Have you ever watched that?
Oh yeah, sure.
I love them. To me, it's one of the most underrated.
Very good.
It's very, very good. That was the one that really grabbed me. But I watched, it might have been Goodfellas, and so it was a bunch of older ones that my mom, or just gangster flicks in general. So I was always into it my whole life. And probably when I was around 25, I was 27 when I really sat down and did, for 3 years, I researched the history of Cosa Nostra every single day for 3 years straight. Just did nothing for 3 years straight, but research and write about the history of to study the history of Cosa Nostra. And the reason I was doing that was to put together this book that you and I had discussed last night. So I was just a guy that had a long time interest in it, man. And I tried to think. Someone asked me recently, why do I think I even had this interest? And I think for me, it's like the rags to riches component of Cosa Nostra. How I come out of poverty. I grew up around the kind of people that people say, well, these ain't good people, drug dealers and prostitutes and just the kind of people that everyone looks down on. But I was around them every day. And what I noticed is some of them are really bad, some are really good, some are loving, some, it's just a lot of them were like products of their environment. But there were people who would be, looked at as being bad, negative, stay away from them. But that was the same woman who provided for us to have a meal that night. They were the same people who, put some money on the table to get, a stromboli at school the next day, or they ordered a pizza, and and I kind of saw that in Cosa Nostra, especially when I looked at like a Henry Hill character, you could say. Like, I was a neighborhood errand guy. I delivered newspapers and mopped floors, and these respected guys in the neighborhood would say, hey, here's $1, run to the store, get me a loaf of bread or something and bring it back. And I could rake their leaves, mow lawns and stuff to make money for myself. And I met people that helped me in life just starting out as being trusted in my neighborhood. And I saw that same kind of characteristic in people like Henry Hill or movies that I used to watch, where you start off really young and you move up.
Let me ask you, so we live in, a town in Pennsylvania that's known, I've said it before, we live in Lancaster, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Lancaster is a city, which a lot of people don't know. We're obviously famous for the county part where all the Amish are, but it's a city like any other place. And while there's no mob presence here, there are bad people like any other place. So I'll ask you, let's say, for instance, Lancaster had a mob presence. Could you have seen yourself getting into that life if you were that kid again?
No. And I'll tell you why.
Because I guess you could have. It wouldn't have been the mafia. It would have been, let's say a drug gang or something like that. But
see, I was around a lot of that stuff. And, my parents were in everything a person could be involved in that was bad.
Right.
And, I seen so much of it, of the negative elements of life, the bad sides of life, that even when I was young, I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I remember thinking, man, this shit ain't right. Like this, like
you were out on it.
Yeah. So for me, and I always say there's two ways people go when they're brought up in this, in this chaotic type of world. You're either you become part of it because when it appears attractive and things like that, or you're the kind of person that says that's not what I want to be. And I was just I got 4 siblings, and all my siblings and everyone, it didn't matter. We all kind of went to, the straight and narrow, and we had every reason to go the opposite way. So for me, no, it was never even, I wouldn't have been a part of it. I just had a different, but I will say this about my parents. My parents lived a troubled life, but my parents were disciplinaries. We had bedtimes, curfews. My father.
That was important.
Yes. Now, my father lived a troubled life, as did my mother, but it didn't matter what they were doing. I couldn't come in after the sun went down. He taught the value of hard work, go out, try to make some money, help the family if you can.
They didn't want you to be what they were.
And you know what's funny, bro? My mom said to me recently, I try to take my mom every now and then. She'll come over my house for a weekend or something. And recently my mom said, she was standing in front of my mantle and looking at all my different accomplishments. And she said to me, me and your father, we taught you guys everything not to be.
Right.
So, and I thought that was an interesting take on how to look at it, but they were disciplinary parents. We didn't act up in the house. We did chores every day. They provided structure, which I think helped us and helped translate that into staying in, not getting in trouble and doing the right thing in life.
Yeah, I relate to that myself. I grew up a little different than you. I mean, my dad kind of gave us everything he didn't have, and we grew up really well. But my dad was the same way. I mean, my dad was one of 15 children. He left home. He has a 7th grade education. He made something out of his life. It's interesting how, again, when we did our John Gotti episode, obviously we went very in depth into John Gotti's life. And I remember telling my dad when we did the episode, because he listened to the episode, and I said, Dad, you and John Gotti had like a pretty similar upbringing, right? You had no father figure whatsoever. And the father figure you had, your actual father, was a terrible person, right? My dad did stupid things when he was a kid. He got his fingers ripped off in a concrete machine. John Gotti lost
John
his.
Gotti did.
Yeah. So they had some weird kind of connections, and I kind of said to my dad one time, why did you not go that kind of way? And it was just a pretty eloquent answer. I didn't want to go to jail, and I kind of just learned how to work hard, and that was that. But yeah, your parents did a good job, man. They, maybe they weren't, I guess personally, they didn't feel like the greatest people, but they did everything for you, and that's what parents do. So salute. It's great to hear.
Yeah.
You went to college. I want to real quick. Someone's mentioning what's the title of RJ's book. So I actually just ordered this book. Okay, it's on Barnes and Noble. You can get it on Amazon. It's called The Olive Branch: 36 Rules of the Bosses. And just in kind of a quick encapsulation, the book is about common themes with every boss, every powerful boss we've seen, right? Tell us about the book quickly.
All right. So, and I should clear it up because there's some confusion that's kind of out there. So I'll explain it. So I've been an independent writer for probably 15, 17 years now, going on 17 years. And so I was an independent writer. I was investing in my own books and stuff like that. So my second book was called, like you just mentioned, The Olive Branch: 36 Rules of the Bosses. So what that book is one day I was sitting in my basement. I was watching Casino, of all movies. And I'm watching, I forget what scene it was, but I was watching the Joe Pesci character. He was doing something freaking crazy. But when I was watching it, I said, man, there was something it was like a really strategic thing that he did. And I said, wow, like to anybody else, it would just look like a crazy gangster mobster. But I saw like this brilliance behind the action. And I was sitting there and it's like a light bulb went off in my head. And I said, I wonder what else is there out there with actual mob bosses, as far as a strategic way of looking at their behaviors, not just shoot the gun, kill, stuff like that, not just extortion or taking over a business, but what is like the business elements, the theories, the strategies behind what they do. And that's when I went into this 3-year research project where I just looked at every single mob boss, from Cosa Nostra boss, to be respectful. I hate saying that, mob boss, but Cosa Nostra boss, from the 5 families. So the Olive Branch is only based off of the 5 family bosses. And I looked at from the time they came over through Ellis Island, like pretty much around 1880, 1890, all the way through about the year 2000. I looked at every boss, and not
He ended with like
Gotti, Gigante, stuff like exactly. Probably Gotti and Gigante, up around those people. Yeah. The newer guys weren't involved in my research. Pete Gotti and stuff like that. They weren't really too much involved.
Now, was Joe Messino involved? No.
Probably to a mod. Yeah. Probably I looked at. I mean, I looked at all of them. Especially like the bigger name ones, but it wasn't about soldiers or associates or capos or even underbosses. I looked at bosses, and I just looked at their behaviors. I didn't cast judgment on the behavior. I just looked at it and looked at, did they advance themselves because of that activity, or did they regress? Did it hurt them? Did what they do cause them to go to prison or to get killed or to be put on the shelf, or did it advance them from associate to now they're being proposed and now they're being made and they're now a soldier, and then that they go from to capo and then underboss into the administration. And I looked at all of them, and what I found looking at all these behaviors was 36 commonalities that were in these 36 rules, I call them. They were either the reason for why a boss grew and continued to go forward, or not using this rule cause them to go backwards or get them in trouble. So I just compiled this list of 36 rules, and that's all the olive branch is. It's my research of it's, and that's why I call it the 36 rules of the bosses. It's the 36 rules, the real rules, not what Cosa Nostra says. Let's be clear. They would be mad at some of them. There's rules I have that they would say, how can you say that? We're against killing a boss. One of my rules is kill the boss, right? Yeah. Because what I found is a lot of bosses throughout history, to become the boss, they had to kill their boss. So how do you be? It's only 5 families, so there can only be 5 bosses at a time. So
that was one of the we did Neil Delacroix. That was one of my issues with Mr. Neil. You know, fascinating guy, definitely a dangerous guy. It was very Cosa Nostra, but the one quality he didn't have was he always seemed okay with just being second in command. He never had, you know, everyone wanted to play by the rules, and he really wanted to play by every rule. And it was like, well, look, if you're going to naturally try to get there, you're just not going to get there. You got to do what you have to do. And the guys above him, you know, were able to take care of that. He was always okay with just being second in command,
which is, and that's okay. I tell people that, and my book isn't, I tell people a regular person can use these rules. My theory is that these 36 rules, regular people can use them. That these same rules are the same rules you find on military generals, politics, Wall Street executives. If you want to advance yourself in this world, the rules are all the same. It don't matter if you're in
a self-help book, maybe.
That's I published it not as a true crime book. I published it as a psychology self-help book.
Fascinating. And I can't wait to read it, to be honest. I'm a big reader, so I'm looking forward to getting it.
Well, real quick, just so there's no confusion. So the book's being republished now. So that's what I was saying. So I independently published it, and it got picked up by a major publisher in Manhattan. So
we'll wait, right?
I'm sorry.
We'll wait. I'm guessing.
Well, no. The olive branch is available, but it's now being republished, and we added 5 new chapters. We added 6 new chapters to it. So it's the same 36 rules that's in the olive branch, but we added 6 additional chapters to it, and it's being republished as a book called The Don 36 Rules of the Boss.
Well, I'm going to wait because I'd like the extras. I want to read that.
So. Yeah. Now, but I tell people, if you have a copy of the olive branch, hold on to it, because that's going to go out of print at some point, and that book's going to become like a piece of art. Yeah, but because the new one's going to be the Don.
Very cool. Jane Creek, how you doing? Corey Vogt.
Jane Creek?
Thanks for watching. Yes, Jane Creek's in here, yes.
Do you know Jane Creek was one of the early people. She was in my top 10 first subscribers.
Yeah, and she subscribes to a lot of the channels.
She's so supportive.
She definitely likes the really good mob content, I think. So
but see,
very supportive.
I became so accustomed to seeing her that if I don't see her in my comments, I think, damn, did I fuck up on this video? I mean, but I haven't seen her in 2 weeks, so I thought, where's Jane?
Jane Creek is a regular viewer of I think really good mob content. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, Wayne Klingman says it's like The Prince. Yeah, Machiavelli, right? Exactly.
That's very interesting, because The Prince is actually modeled in the reprint that I'm doing right now. So the Don is. I don't want to release too much, but I use Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince all throughout the republication. So I found all 36 of my rules inside of The Prince in a different example. And I pulled all the examples out, and I used the quotes inside of the Don. So when the Don comes out next year, it's already written, it's done, it's in its second stage of editing. So we'll have it out probably by like early to mid next year. It's fantastic, man. I'm really proud of it. I spent the last 3 years working on that.
Well, your subscriber base on YouTube continues to get higher and higher. You've only done about 20 videos, it seems like. And what, like I said, what I love about your videos is they're thought out. They have a mean, right? They're not just this is this person, here's stuff about them. You go into a theory-based conversation. One of the videos you did that I really wanted to talk about, because it relates, I think, nowadays just to an interesting article I read in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if you did as well. I'll explain it if you didn't, but you did a video on John Alet, right? And you did a video where you have a picture of him posing in Little Italy. And you discussed how the mob is no longer a powerful organization because, again, any person with a brain that's ever studied the mob knows that if that were 1978, that would not happen. John Alet would have got 2 in the back of the head and left there to bleed out into the street.
And no one would have even called the police.
Exactly right.
They would have left him there.
And I related.
You know what? I would go further and say the person who shot him wouldn't have had them run. He could have walked back inside and finished his meal. Yeah, and, I mean, that's how it was there at the time.
And to make one better, if the police did come, again, like you said, not one person would say a word. It would be like Sonny in A Bronx Tale, right?
Exactly.
You'd line people up and no one would say anything.
Exactly.
So it was fascinating to think about because recently we had a Colombo family boss, Mush Russo, Vinny Unions, John Regano, all these different guys. And there was an article published a few weeks later about the state of the mafia and how these older guys like Mush Russo were complaining that the Cosa Nostra won't survive because it can't survive because of, you look at the kids involved now, they didn't have to grow up like John Gotti did or Jimmy Burke did or some of these people that were big players in the mob. They didn't have to grow up in poverty. They were given everything they wanted. They have cell phones. You're calling out hits. You're texting people that you're going to kill people. And it was fascinating to think about because when we look at kind of the pecking order of crime in this country, the mob is way down at this point. You know, that their legs are being kicked out from under because there's just not many real ones left.
You know, and that's what I try to explain to people because I get, you know, I've taken the position on almost every video that I have put out that Cosa Nostra is just, it's not around it. It's not. Now the name and its presence might be here. I mean, to say the Gambino family, that's different than saying, like, I look at power and presence completely different. So there's people that have arsenal, have guns, have the ability to kill, but they can't even fix a parking ticket. So power is the ability to affect change. And that's what I try to get people to understand. The mob at a time had the ability to put Supreme Court justices in place. Lucky Luciano walked in to Governor Al Smith's office and yelled at him. And, you know, because of his stance on trying to repeal prohibition, they were putting in politicians. They had relationships where they were putting in captains and commissioners and things like that. They had power. They controlled people that controlled power. And what's around today is, in my opinion, and it might be a good thing in many ways, but how I look at it today is Cosa Nostra went back to before it had the connections with the upper world.
So when we talk about but again, that's crazy because even during the 1920s, right, when Al Capone was running Chicago, Al Capone was incredibly powerful. Like he had half of the police force on his payroll.
Yeah,
like, that's power. The mob today is a bunch of guys with a ton of cash and no real credit, right? You can have all the cash in the world, but if you have
that's a great
credit,
one. Yeah.
Right? Like let me explain. Like, so this is fascinating because it connects to my personal life right now. So I remember in my 20s, I'm 32 now. My mother and father beat it in my head. Go out, get credit cards, build your credit up. I spurned them. I didn't give them. I don't need credit. I'm fine. I have money. It's okay. The other day, I find this beautiful house. I'm ready to buy it. I'm thinking, it'll be fine. I'll get approved. No issue. Mortgage guy comes back. He says, well, your credit's okay. He goes, but you have a couple of notches here you didn't take care of. I said, well, it was only like $400. Like, they're not going to give me it. He's like, no, they're not going to give you it. He said, you got to have credit. He goes, doesn't matter how much money you have. He said, it's just how life is. Yeah. And that's what it is now. It's, you know, and again, we could also say that when it comes to the cash, most of the rackets that you used to have. So for instance, you can't extort people anymore. Okay. And remember the Sopranos episode when it was in the later seasons where they go into that like Starbucks type of coffee shop and try to extort the company. And the guy's like, every coffee bean's accounted for here. There's nothing I can do to give you anything on anything. The gambling stuff, all that stuff. It's dried up.
The silly thing about extortion, which, and I've had people in my comment section, take hard positions against me for saying that, the mob, the FBI and investigators and police officers, sometimes we have to be careful with what we read and assuming that's what the mob actually did. A lot of people don't realize in the mob's golden era, a lot of businessmen came to the mob, wanted to work with them. It wasn't so much I'm not saying there's not exceptions to the rule and it didn't happen, but oftentimes the only people who were losing was the outsiders who actually seemed to love Cosa Nostra pretty much. But people that the everyday consumer that walked in to buy a loaf of bread, he was the guy who was getting screwed. But business owners, the mob was making them a pretty sweet deal and was saying, listen, I mean, they could get supplies cheaper, mark up things higher because the mob was providing regulation over the businesses and saying, hey, I'm going to make all the people in your industry raise their prices up. So you can move less volume, but make the same profit because you're all going to raise the price. And I have contacts with all the suppliers who will sell you pizza dough a little bit cheaper. Right. I control the trucks that bring the stuff in. You'll get it a little. It was a negotiation. They could work together. I say this about the unions. A lot of, Hoffa made a lot of money for the union on investing in Vegas and giving out pension loans. It was in their benefit. So if you walk into a business and you put a fucking gun to someone's head and say, I want this much a week, you're asking for it not to end well. You have to kind of negotiate and work with people.
And I equate it today to your very normal HOA fee. Okay. HOA fees are glorified extortion. Okay. They do nothing for you. Okay?
Yeah.
It's, hey, you're going to pay us $40 or $60 or $100 on top of what you already pay, plus property tax. And we don't really know why you pay it because you still have to cut your own grass. You still have to do everything on your own. But you're basically renting the land off us and we're going to take a little piece.
Yeah.
Again, we don't know where the money goes, but that's what it is. And I think in these cases, as you said, it was almost better to pay that a little bit amount because, again, these were people that didn't exactly like the police, okay? They weren't going to run to the police and complain about problems. And we have to remember, in those neighborhoods, so let's say Bensonhurst or the Flatlands or Astoria or wherever, those neighborhoods were beautiful. They were clean. There was no crime. There was nothing going on. And as you said, it almost, by you paying and being part of the community, it was like a community fee. It was a civic fee, let's say.
And they did, and many of the businesses didn't mind paying it. It wasn't a lot of people upset. I say this. When Francis Coppola was trying to film The Godfather in Little Italy, he couldn't. I mean, he would go he went in and sat down and came back out. His truck was missing because the Colombo family didn't want the movie made, and they were letting him know, you don't just come here and do this is all.
You gotta broker things. Yeah.
It was there was the glory days of Cosa Nostra. They have very good negotiators in there. They tried to work with you to make a negotiation to where. Now I will say, oftentimes you couldn't really say no, I guess maybe to a certain extent, but they were making it so sweet where, Sammy Gravano said that. He said he never extorted. He said that these construction contractors
ran to me,
lined up to do business with him because they were all making money. Everybody was making money. And I always take this position. The mob was very easy to blame everything on. The mob took the fall for a lot of crooked union officials, a lot of dirty businessmen, a lot of people, a lot of politicians, a lot of police, a lot of the police force. Those guys all scampered off, and like they have clean hands. But
I mean, I don't want to bring this up, but I mean, the 45th president of the United States is a prime example of that. I mean, he was, well, let's be honest, did some dirty tricks when he was building some of his things. You know, look who ended up getting the brunt of it. Tony
he was
Salerno,
on it. He would add, he was paying a mob tax. I don't care what no one says. You ain't putting up a building in the 80s in New York without paying the mob. I don't care who you are. There isn't. No, I don't blame him. He didn't have no choice. The mob controlled everything that was going on as far as construction in New York City.
Phil Leonetti talked about that in one of the interviews he did. He talked about in Atlantic City, they sold Trump a piece of a piece of land that they had.
Yeah,
he wanted to build his casino on it.
But you know what they had, and that's what I'm saying. The mob guys went to jail. Those guys were called all these names, but they took the fall for a lot of people. I take the position that anywhere you go, that there's wealth and there's power, and you're going to find these activities. So big anything is corrupt. Typically, you can find corruption inside of it somewhere. As things get real big, corruption starts to occur. So, a lot of these big businessmen and stuff, it was easy to point their finger at the gangster and say, but a lot of those guys were knocking on the door. A lot of union people, a lot of people came. I saw Michael Franzese talk about that. I saw Sammy talk about it. I saw a lot of guys talk about how these guys were coming to them with a proposal, with a deal. Hey, I have this way. We can all. I sometimes ask people, how do people think that the mob finds out about a big shipment coming in from Lufthansa? Someone has to be telling, right?
They probably have they have a book, a degenerate gambler that owes money, and he's the head security guy at Lufthansa, which is exactly what happened.
Exactly.
The head security guy, that Frenchy guy, was a real person. He got in deep with the mob over gambling, and Jimmy Burke says, "Well, instead of paying us, why don't you just tip us off on some loads?" Before you know it, they're jacking $8 million in jewels.
They were all. It was a lot of people working with them, and but my point is, what's going on today? They're not really so connected in with the power structure. Right. So you have to have a connection with power. You have to have people who control over if you can, like I said in one of my videos, if you just have control over the police commissioner, it gives you control over the whole precinct. If you control the mayor, it gives you control over the whole city. If you control the governor, it gives you control over a state sometimes, So, Frank Costello, if I remember correctly, sat with the New York State Supreme Court justice at Franklin Roosevelt's inauguration.
Yeah, it's crazy.
These guys were,
power.
It was talking about, power and having money or having guns or having a clique of people are two different things. So you can scare people, threaten people, stuff like that, but that won't usually take you so far. You need to be able to do corrupt acts, but have the person who is in control of indicting you on your side. And that's what they don't have right now.
Or be able to compromise them like Meyer did with
exactly
Hoover, right?
Exactly.
Which was brilliant at any rate. But again, even when we're looking at the rackets, for instance, Fat Tony Salerno was making like hundreds of millions of dollars through the numbers racket. If you ask 10 people on the street what a numbers racket is right now, they would have no idea what that even means. It's the lottery, which is a legal business now, and you can go to any convenience store in the world and play it. But back then, the mob ran it. Like, there's none of that anymore. The drug laws in this country are so draconian that, like, you can't really sell weed anymore. If you do, they jam you up with some guns, you're doing 40 years, like just with a kilo or something. It's very hard to sell drugs. There's so much cameras and phone taps and all that sort of shit. Gambling is dried up. In Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, you can bet legally. There are going to be some people that want to bet on credit, and that's fine. But
Well, that's
George
yeah.
Anastasia said this, the writer, and I always found this to be so true, especially now. George Anastasia talks about now that the mob is scraping the bottom of the gene pool, right? And that all the Italians now are going and becoming doctors and lawyers and, hedge fund managers or and it's pretty much on point at this point.
Yeah.
Why grow up and do stuff that you're gonna get caught with? You're gonna get caught. I mean,
There's no, and I always try to tell people the government always comes in last. They wait for someone else to build something up and then they take over it. But if you really look at a lot of things that happen in this country now, the mob started it. So what they call like predatory lending now. The mob were the people who gave out loans to help people. Like if you needed a business loan, if you needed to, if someone needed credit, all the stores gave out credit. You could walk in and if you don't get paid till Friday, you could walk in and say, hey, I need, the mob will help you out. The mob did so much for their community. So people bought houses, people started businesses, the mob did a lot of things to help out their community. So what they called the mob was called as Shylockers, or now banks are doing banks took over the whole lending system. The mob built a lot of Meyer Lansky saw guys playing dice outside and said, hey, I want to turn this into something that's elegant. And he put green cloth down on the table and said he wanted to turn it into a gentleman's thing where you come inside and you get a drink. And
he literally went to places where he said, okay, these are kind of these. So he goes to Saratoga, for instance. They have the racing track. He goes up there and says, look, we're not going to just jump in here and do this on the take. We're just going to do it on our own. We're going to cut you in as well. So we'll take a portion, we'll get it to the municipalities here, and everybody makes money.
Yeah.
Before you know it, it's in Florida, and then it's in New Orleans, then it's in Vegas eventually. That's how this all started.
They created so much of what's going on today. Now you see escort agencies are becoming legal. Right. Certain states have legal prostitution, prohibition. The mob set up all those pipelines to all the trucking, the warehouses, all that stuff a lot of that stuff was set up by the mob. So today, when you have a lot of the things that we see, the government now controls a lot of liquor distribution. They are now beginning to control most of narcotics. I mean, they're now legalizing certain drugs, especially marijuana is a big one. Gambling, lending. A lot of what they were the guys who were originally backing politicians.
And that's the government thing about the mob. They're a huge part of the last 100 years in this country. Huge. Everything that we look at, that we deal with, like you just basically eloquently said, is all now legal.
Yeah.
It was all, but so you have to go back and ask yourself, like, why did, eventually the laws changed and it's different now. But yeah, all of this was very influenced by the mob. And
yes,
nowadays you just don't have those types of connections anymore. Even unions. There's a couple people messing around with unions now, but
the mob doesn't. I mean, the government doesn't seem to like very much consolidations of power. They always try to break it up. So anytime entity tries to form itself and become really, really big, the government doesn't like any groups of people to become too big because it's a threat to them. I believe I'll always take this position. Cosa Nostra should be taught in universities. I really believe that. If you look at their history, which I think they have a beautiful history. I'm very much a respecter of their culture, of their way of life, of their people. And I think, and I talked about this in my friend Costello video, I believe that the mob created the model for how any oppressed people, oppressed ethnic groups save themselves. The state doesn't ever save anybody. You got to come together and build your own thing. And that's what Cosa Nostra did. The Italians in this country, when the Sicilians came over here, they were treated like shit, treated terrible by everybody. The Irish hated them. The Jews hated them. They were, it's very similar to what what you see now with like all of this debate on Mexicans coming over, and you have these major news networks that say, well, they're bringing COVID in, and they're part of MS-13, they're all gang members, and they're dirty and this. But see, that's the tactics that this country uses anytime someone's trying to come in that they don't want.
It's hypocrisy because, real quick, I mean, the same people that are anchoring this crap, weirdly enough, all came from immigrants, right?
And that's what I'm saying. So if you go back and you look at what the media did to the Sicilians when they came here, they slandered the Sicilian people so badly. They said they're diseased. They are bringing the gangsters. You know, they had millions come over, and they called them Italian. You know, Sicilians were viewed as being gangsters, being criminals, all being a part of this secret society mafia and stuff. 98%, 99% of the Sicilian migration wave, those people just wanted to set up life in this quote unquote land of opportunity. They wanted to give a better schooling system to their children,
build railroads,
get a job that wasn't so labor intensive and things like that. But the media branded them the criminals. They scared the whole country. The media turned this country against the Italians, against the Sicilians, by misbranding them as being violent, criminal, lacking American values, stealing American jobs. These are all the same things we hear right now about anybody who wants to come into this country. Now, I'm not taking a position that there's some of the Mexican that are coming over, the Mexican immigration. Of course, there's going to be a criminal element, a gang element, and certain things. But most people the average person just wants a good life, bro. They just want to go to work, take care of their families, and
I've tried saying this forever. Go to America's kitchens, go to America's lawns, go to America's gardens, go to Americans' hotels. I mean, it's all Mexican. They work hard. They just want to, hopefully, and you know what's crazy as well? Like a lot of the money they do, they're sending it home to try to get those people here.
That's what the Sicilians were doing. Yeah. They came over here trying to make some money. Some of them went back and tried to, do some things back home, help people back home. Yo, man, I can't believe more people don't know about how badly the Italians were treated when they came over. I mean, it should be talked about. I was recently reading about this Columbus Day thing, why that was put into place. When I think it happened in New Orleans when there was like 13 Sicilians that were like either hung or executed or something because of a cop that got killed, and all 13 were found innocent. And this regular rank and file people just walked in, took all these Italians and killed them. And there was like an uproar around the country for even Italy was mad. They closed the embassy down. They didn't want to, be involved with the U.S. And the president at the time, I forget who the president was, but he was afraid that he would lose re-election because of all this bad stuff that was going on. Italy was upset. The Italian Americans in this country were upset. So they passed this Columbus Day holiday as like, but it was complete. It was politics. It was like, we're going to pass this to garner support from the Italians. Yeah, they were treated so bad. A lot of them, millions of them, after they came here, they went back because that's how bad it was for them here. They were treated really, really bad in this country by people. I mean, like I said in my video, on my friend Costello video, they could call the cops sometimes because their house is being burglarized or someone's harassing them. Bro, the cops wouldn't even come.
So they said, fuck this, we're going to start our own thing.
And they set up their own policing force, their own way to protect their people. They set up their own. I mean, the banks wouldn't give them money because they have no collateral, no credit, no nothing. Mm-hmm. You come over here, you have nothing. Who's going to help you? Cosa Nostra had to be established. It was set up as a matter of survival. It truly, truly was. They helped their people, gave jobs to their people, took care of their elderly, took care of their poor, did a lot of really good things for their people. A lot of good things. They would own Cosa Nostra. I talked about this too. Sammy talked about how his father said, "You see those people over there? Those are bad people, but they're our bad people." Yeah. And his father understood. We're not like them, but we need them. They are critical to our survival. Without them, we have no protection.
Yeah, we saw it again in the Bronx Tale when C's father says, they're bad people, but and he kind of alluded to though, but they're our people, right?
It's all we got. It's all.
You don't look at people like that, but I know I can't totally keep you away from them, but they're part of who we are, South Philly, what's up? Good to see you. Wayne Klingman, thank you. Real quick, I will throw this out. If anyone has any questions, we're not going to be on here forever, but if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to ask them. I did want to ask you about a video you did, and I'm proud that you did it because in this mob genre, right, I don't agree with, I feel like if you do crimes and you take the money and the power and the respect, you should agree that, and I said this to you, I feel like a lot of these guys, these old school guys, let's say Salerno or Corallo or anybody that was old school, they get into this life and they say to themselves, this is the life I've chosen. I'm married to this. And the only way I'm going to be done with it is I'm going to die or I'm going to go to jail, right? And they've accepted that. Now, they assume that everyone they bring in accepts that same oath, right? But we have these people that commit all these crimes, they kill all these people, and then they say, you know what? I don't really want to go to jail, so I'm just going to tell on everybody else. Now, most people in this genre that are fans of it say, well, I don't agree with that. And I don't agree with it. But you did a video on Sammy, and you asked, was he an informant or was he a strategist? And I'll ask you, and I said this to you before we started, I think if you're going to talk about Sammy Gravano and how big of a rat he is, or John Aylett or any of these people, and we know that they are, but do yourself a favor, research Lucky Luciano a little bit. But when he did it, he was a strategist. He was eliminating his competition.
Mm-hmm.
They all informed, okay? But you'll ask yourself, was Sammy really a strategist? It's a fascinating question to ask because I'll tell you one thing that Sammy's doing that John Gotti's not, and Andrew Ruggiero's not, and Frank Lacasio's not, and all these different guys are not. You know what he's doing? He's out on the street, making money, living life. So was he really a strategist?
In
the end?
It's a complicated question, and it's hard to answer because the audience is pretty sold on, and sometimes I feel nervous to really even talk about this because the viewing audience looks at Cosa Nostra as if they are inside of it themselves,
but
which is
RJ,
okay.
Real quick. Here's why I don't feel bad when I have these comments and make these comments. I'm not in the mafia, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I've said before, the reason I don't kill people and steal stuff and do stuff like that is because I don't want to go to jail. So I don't put myself in those positions. It's pretty simple. Now, if I were in that life, I would probably accept the life that I have. And that's just what it is. But continue.
You see, now, for me, I'm a historian, an analyst.
Mm-hmm.
I do behavior analysis. I try to just look at things for what they are, not so much for what, people are not what they say they are. People are what they do, right? So if you look at Cosa Nostra, one of the most fascinating reads, I've read hundreds of books on Cosa Nostra, hundreds and hundreds. I've listened to thousands of hours of audio and video. One of the greatest things I ever read was Joe Valachi's testimony. And he talks about details. I read the whole testimony, probably read it 2 or 3 times. Joe Valachi talks about how bad he struggled with money sometimes financially, while the bosses were taking everything from these lower level guys. He talked about how, during the Costello Maresi War, how, they patronized Salvatore Maranzano with something close to $200,000. They were getting $25 a week to survive. He said while he was fighting the war, he was going out and hijacking trucks and stuff and trying to make some money to survive. While there's tens of thousands being turned into the boss they're fighting for.
Right.
And then he talked about how, he talked about why he wanted to bring the whole organization down. And he said, he talked about how they make these claims of being honorable and this and this and that, but he said, it's all just this, it's just this thing where, like, the bottom rung of Cosa Nostra, most people don't understand. But it really is. Most people think that mobsters are like rich and make a lot of money. You could probably make more money working at McDonald's.
Especially like your normal like associate. It's kind of like in the drug organization. It's like a corner boy, right? Corner boy makes
there's no money in that.
$15-$20 an hour.
Yeah, there's no money in being part of that life, and they all talk about got to kick up, more, and there's never enough. Your boss is living in Cosa Nostra is set up no different than any other entity. If you go to work for a corporation and your owner comes in with a Mercedes Benz and he's the owner. And then he has middle management, let's say, which we call capo regimes. And then he has a vice president for him. And then he has an HR department, which we call a consigliere. Then you have all these soldiers. And then you have you have these entry-level employees and you have temps. And then the entry-level employees and the temp employees and a lot of even the management. So they don't make much money. Cosa Nostra is the same way. These guys, a lot of them live in little apartments. They struggle financially. They're living check to check, day to day. Valachi talked about that, how there was very few millionaires. He testified and said that there wasn't a lot of millionaires. And he said sometimes he was doing good, but a lot of times he was struggling. And, so to answer your question, Cosa Nostra, if you just look at the history of it, it wasn't always fair to the people in the lower rung. So you're sometimes almost like, and now this guy gets arrested. You sent this guy out. I read this article on this Pete Tuccio. Is that his name, from Philadelphia?
Yeah, I know him well.
Okay, well, I think about this. This guy's going to serve 10 years in prison. He got a 10-year sentence, I think.
Well, right? Peter Tuccio got 10 years because of who he hung out with. Pretty simple.
It didn't help being around Joey Merlino. But, I think about, you got this 24-year-old kid. This guy's like this young kid. And I think he was going to go set a Mercedes Benz on fire to try to.
His father was a cop.
Yeah. Comes from a good family. But this kid is going to serve 10 years in jail because he was collecting for somebody that had so much more than what he has. And I sometimes think, like, and Mikey Scars talked about this, how when he went into jail, they took his businesses, took his money, they took everything. And they told his wife to get on welfare. So when you say, and he
you're
said,
always asking for them to do it.
And that's what he said. Like, you're almost begging this guy to cooperate. Like
you're either going to cooperate or, like in Angelo Bruno's case, they're just going to fucking kill you and say, we're done with this.
And that's what I'm saying.
With getting pinched here. There was funny. OC Shorts did a great video about this. He talked about like these wiretaps that he had heard, and there was a boss in Cleveland mentioned it on wiretap. He talked about how in Philadelphia, Angelo Bruno's men, their wives couldn't write a check for $5, but Angelo Bruno's wife could write a check for $5 million.
Yeah,
and it got to that point where it's like, we've seen it with all these guys. We saw it with Paul Castano, who had this hypocrisy about selling drugs, and you look at some of the middle management, even lower management, at the time, like Gotti, and he's saying, well, what the fuck? Like, but you're okay with taking money from, these different people. You live in that big house, and what are we doing? We're bleeding. This guy's bleeding us to death.
While Paul was still the boss, I forget how they collected the money, but Sammy talked about it in his book. And he paid Paul, it might have been to Chico, I forget who it was, but Paul was paid twice for his piece. Sammy's cut got given to Paul by mistake. So Sammy goes to Paul and says, hey, I already gave you the money. What was given to you? Yeah, that was mine. And Paul says, shh, don't bring up money anymore. Just says that to Sammy. And he's thinking, and then when they get outside, I want to say it was Frank DeChico. I forget who it was, but DeChico's laughing his ass off. And he's saying, you're never getting that money back. Once Paul gets his hands on money, you are not getting it back. So you're living in a mansion in Staten Island. You got $1 billion. You got so much money. Paul was rich and big before he was the boss. Paul owned a lot of businesses, did really, really well. And you're going to take a guy's little $20,000 who's a soldier in the family, you know, and these things happen. It's almost
like a sad cautionary tale, really. Like, I always remember this scene. You've seen The Wire?
Some of it, yeah, yes.
Okay, so late in the show, there's a character that he has a conversation with a police officer in the show that kind of becomes like a friend to him in a way. And he talks about how, so this character throughout the show is he's always a loyal guy. You know, he never misses time. He's always selling out. He's always doing everything he needs to do. And he talks about how when he gets arrested, though, where's my paid lawyer? You know, where's my bail? You know, where do I get in the end? Right? I've never fucked up a count. I've never done anything wrong. And it's like, what do I get in the end? And he's like, these people, they don't give a fuck about me. You know, they're not going to pay for my funeral when I die. You know, and when we look back at the mob, there was a golden era where, you know, they definitely took care of you. You know, but this stuff like in The Sopranos, where like you know, like, you really think Paul Castellano was going to give Carmela, like, if that were Carmela, you really think he was going to give her $100,000 while Tony was in a coma? Fuck no. It was going to make her, you know, it wouldn't matter. That's something that happened.
And, you know, that's one of the points that I was trying to make in that, is he a rat or a strategist? Now, I wasn't taking a position. I'm just posing the question for people to talk and have a debate, you know, just something to think about. But one of the things I mentioned there was John Panisi. And I found it interesting when he talked about, on his Vlad TV interview, when he talked about, you know, okay, call me what you want to call me. You want to call me a rat? Fine. But my question that I try to get people to understand, take a step back from all of it. And Cosa Nostra, you know, you see these guys in a suit and they're good looking and they, you know, and they're like, I said this before, people love egotistical people. We just don't like to deal with them. But watching them is fun. The way they act brash and they act in this way that we wish we could be, you know. But when you look at these people, you know, they're not, like, try to take a step back and analyze them and say, how, like, are we okay with their behaviors? So you see this lower level guy, he ratted. Fine, he broke the rule. But should we hold the boss and the underboss and the administration and the capos, should we hold them to the oath that they also gave at the making ceremony? This is a brotherhood. I'm your brother. We are a family. We look out for one another. You know, they're telling the lower level guy this, you know, we are a family. But then these lower level guys get busted and get caught, and it's fuck like you. Yeah. You know, it's off. Who cares? You know,
when you have to say to yourself, in a way, and I mentioned this to you, in the glory days of the mob, there were no rats, right? Because everything was hemmed in. They did the research on these people. They brought them in. They made sure they knew who they were. But it ultimately got to a point where they just became greedy and said, I don't care who you are. As long as you're giving me a check, I'm good with it. I don't care what you are and who you are. You could be half Irish. You could be, you know, whatever. As long as you're kicking up to me, I don't care what you do. And it got out of control where you're just letting anyone in.
And it becomes
then you get surprised when, and I said this to you as well, let's look through the list here of really big rats, right? John Alite, you know, Gravano, Henry Hill, Willie Boy Johnson, Gene Borello, Ron Previty, Joe Messino, all these guys. There's one common characteristic, just like your book, 36 Rules, right? There's one common characteristic between all those guys. Not one of them was born into the mob. They all chose it.
Mm-hmm.
Or
exactly.
They weren't even Italian in Henry Hill or Willie Boy Johnson's case. They didn't, you know, look at all the successful mob guys for the most part. Carlo, you know, all these different guys, Lucky, all these different people. They were all pretty much born into it. It was part of their lineage and their life. These guys, they chose that life.
Yeah. No, and you know, I always tell people that you can hate the rat, but you should study him to understand his psyche and why he does certain things. You know, the guy I've been studying past week or so, Jimmy Calandra, and he said something that I found very interesting. He talked about how you have these mob breeding grounds. These breeding grounds,
Right.
where you have it's all like and Bensonhurst used to be an area like this.
Kind of almost like your story, where the kid was almost taken care of by these people.
Exactly. So, and these areas that are heavily mobbed up, very mob controlled. And he talked about how in these, Calandra talked about how they prey on little kids. And like it's like indoctrination. He talked about how they get you when you're young, and they start telling you things and telling you, "Hey, we're family." You know, the Bath Ave gang, that group, they was very young when they first formed that group.
Like
they grew up and got
10 years old, right?
Yeah, they grew up and then got stronger and bigger and then started working, I think, for the Bonanos and stuff. But they started young. But he was around running errands for these really important people.
Yeah.
But these guys who know better are telling kids, one day, if you listen to us, don't ever tell, don't ever do this. And he says in the quote I read something about how, you know, even if your mother is dying, you leave her side and you come to us.
Come to us.
You know,
What do
and
you
it's
expect
almost,
them to be? Yeah.
and it's almost like if you look at, you know, and me and you discussed this last night, when you see a like a Islamic terrorist, a little kid that's 13, blow themselves up, that they'll take a bomb and walk towards a bunch of Americans or whomever and blow themselves up. And you say, how can someone's mind get that warped? It's because from the time they were, just understand the psychology at a minimal level. You understand that the mind is up until age 13. I think they call that your formative years. That's when your mind is is the most accessible. You can teach a person anything those first 13 years. A lot of what you are, what I am, what most of our viewers are, a lot of what we are came out of our first 13 years. People don't realize that. Most of your pains, your troubles, things that you're dealing with, interpersonal problems, a lot of them were developed in those first 13 years. And if you take a little kid from what Jimmy Calandra called a mob breeding ground, and you get him when he's young, you can poison this guy's mind. And that's what he talked about. They prey upon these kids, and then these guys become 18, 19, 20, and all they ever knew was the boss is the boss. I have to do what he says. And they're like indoctrinated.
And before they know it,
they're
literally killing their best friends because they were told to do it.
But you know what's funny though? So, and I think in Calandra, because I believe, I don't want to misquote him, and if I'm wrong, I will apologize. But I believe he considers himself to be one of those kids that was indoctrinated.
I think of Shirley he does. I mean, I wouldn't think anything different. I mean, his story is, really, you can, anyone that wants to judge him for who he is, he almost was meant to be what he is.
And that's my point.
What else did he know?
But from the viewing audience, there's people who hate him and say he's a rat, he's this, but no one ever stops and analyzes the guy who the developed adult that grooms this kid. I love that audio tape of, I think it was Sal Alvalino and Tony Ducks, when they're in the car and they're talking, and he says, so and so just made his son. Would you make your son? Things like that. And they're saying, no, I wouldn't make my son. And I think even there was a little small meeting between that Chin Gigante was at with John Gotti Sr. And Sr. walks in and says, hey, Chin, I just made my son.
Yes.
And then Chin says, well, I'm sorry to hear that. So you won't bring your son into this life, but you'll bring someone else's kid. You'll take some other small little boy. You'll tell your kids, keep your nose clean, go to school, go to college, blah, blah, blah. But you tell my kid or someone else's kid, I'm the boss. All hail the boss. The boss is God.
It's sickening, really. It's predatory. I mean, look at Philip Leonetti, prime example. I've always had a small tinge of sorrow for him, just because I don't think Philip Leonetti wanted to be in that life. And if we look at Scarfo's kid, I mean, Scarfa's own son killed himself because he didn't like his dad was such a psychopath that was like, no, you're gonna be in it. I don't care what you want to do. You're doing what I tell you, and you're gonna do it. Philip Leonetti had no shot. He had no father to tell him no. Nicky was his father. Nicky told him what he was gonna do.
He has such a fascinating autobiography. I read hundreds of books on this subject. He has one of the better ones also that I have read.
Shout out to Scott Bernstein, a friend of the show.
I didn't know that, but
co-authored the book.
Mafia Prince. It's a fantastic book. It was a fantastic book. I like the books that come directly from the person who's involved, not these historians and these researchers. That's why I would never write it. Even though I'm a writer, I would never write a book on a mafia guy.
Do you remember in the book when Nicky heard about that he wrote the book? Do you remember that?
Yeah, he
painted.
Yeah. You know, but see, my favorite thing, and it wasn't even in the book, but he talked about this on some documentary film. And Phil Leonetti said, and I thought it was interesting because me and my daughter used to always watch this Monsters Inc. Film. And Phil Leonetti says it's kind of like that he was kind of like that little girl in Monsters Inc. All these monsters were supposed to be scary. They were scaring everybody. They were supposed to be the bad, scary people. But to the little girl, they were normal.
Yes.
They were just normal people. And he said he felt like he was that way. Like all these people, his uncle and everything, and everyone he was around, Scarfo took Phil as a little boy. He had to go kill someone or something, or go out on a hit. And he tells Phil, he says, I want to take you with me in the car because the cops won't suspect anything if I have a kid with me or something. So he takes Phil. I don't know if it was a hit or there was something he had to do for Cosa Nostra that was going to be big. And he took Phil with him. And in the car, he's teaching. He's a little boy, a little tiny boy. He takes his son. He takes him along with them. And he's like, and he goes out on a hit with a little boy. John A. Light said that he took his son with him before to kill someone. Yeah, you know, but I always think to myself, for Scarfo to take a look, your little nephew. I got 6 nieces and nephews. People hate Phil Leonetti, but they'll call Scarfo a stand-up guy. You took a little boy on a murder hit with you.
I mean, he was a lunatic. I mean, I hear you. Greg Scarpa probably did the same type of shit. I mean, these are sociopath lunatics. I mean,
now maybe within there's a different way that you analyze it. I can only look at it as an analyst, as a historian, as from an outsider's perspective. So I can fairly assess the whole picture. The rat, okay, he's bad. He's terrible. Okay, he took the stand to save his own skin, put innocent people behind. You know, a guy I really feel bad for, who I felt bad for, was James Failla. Is that how you say his last name?
Jimmy Brown.
Jimmy Brown. He went to jail because of Sammy.
Yeah.
He never did anything. He never even got caught.
A really interesting guy, too. I mean, he was a great earner as well. Literally ran the garbage industry. I mean,
he can
Ali
all of New York.
Yeah.
All of New York City, he monopolized the whole garbage industry. But he was one of the guys, they kept his nose clean, never talked. Remember, when Paul Castellano's mansion was wiretapped, they had like hundreds of hours of recordings. He was sometimes at Paul's house every day of the week because he was a big family earner. All those meetings, a lot of those guys got indicted, went to jail. Jimmy Brown beat the case because they couldn't pick him up on wiretap. He wasn't talking. He understood. He had that poster in his club. It was a cockroach that had headphones on.
Yeah, I heard a simple thing one time. They bugged him for 6 months straight
and got nothing.
They didn't hear more than 10 words said by him.
So when you see a guy like that go to jail and die, he died in prison, didn't he?
I believe he did. Yeah.
Yeah, he died in prison, but Sammy testified against him when he turned informant. Mm-hmm. So that's why I can understand the people that say, I fucking hate these informants, because Sammy didn't just bring down Gotti. He brought a lot of people down.
Look at Frankie Loke. I mean, Frankie Loke Frank Loke should have got a life sentence for what he did, but
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was part of that Gotti group,
Hmm.
and it all came down. I always thought with Leonetti, I always threw this around, and I threw this to Scott. We interviewed Scott about Nicky Scarfo and Philip and everything, and I posed the question to him about, if I'm Leonetti and Salvi Testa, why not just kill Nicky? Get him out of the
You know
way.
what?
You take
Always
over.
see, that's the indoctrination part. That's the part that people don't see. They're so, it's from the time most guys, if you become a made guy in Cosa Nostra, you started as a little guy. Like, you were brought up into this thing where you're taught complete subservience to the boss. And Scarfo would kill.
Boss is the boss, right?
Yeah, Scarfo will kill you in a second. Kill you in a second. He was so feared. I mean, I always think about that though. When a guy becomes that dangerous, you have to off with his head because he's a threat to everybody. Yeah. And no one, I don't think a lot of guys, I mean, what do you think? I don't think Scarfo was overly loved in his family. He was
a terrible boss. I've often ranked him as one of the worst bosses ever. I mean, he was just a complete maniac. He instituted this stupid mob tax. He ostracized people. He was taking a ton from them. He was going at people that, Riccobene. And Riccobene told him to go fuck himself, basically, and just started.
And look what happened with him. And they were trying to kill him with this in front of his mother and stuff. Like, it was.
I always wonder how nobody had the balls to do anything to Nicky Scarfo. Like Salvi Testa would have been a great boss. I've always said that. I thought he had the. He had the bloodlines. He had the arm. He was young. I mean, he would have been the. It's often interesting to think about that if they'd have killed Nicky, let's say early 80s or after, let's say mid 80s, it's conceivable to think Salvi could still be the boss today.
Yeah,
because Salvi was young. Salvi was like 35.
He was very young.
And Phil Leonetti, if he didn't want to be a part of that life, he could have went to Salvi and said, "Look, this isn't really for me. I'll be just like a counselor on the side, but I want out." And Salvi would have taken over.
And Phil said, I think that was when they killed Salvi, that was when he
was done.
He was done. And eventually you start seeing like you're next in line, when you start seeing just a guy who just kill anybody, you start wondering about yourself. Like, and it was just,
he killed that guy Vincent Falcone, and he looked at Leon and he goes, "I love this. I fucking love this." And then shot him again. It's like, there's something wrong there.
Yeah, those kind of people, man, they're like sociopaths, though. They got like something it's not right within them. Like, that isn't the way to lead anything. That's that's just paranoia. When you just start
different if Nicky were a hitman, right? Like, or an enforcer, like it's his job to kill people. Like, I get it, but like he just like enjoyed doing it. It was like a serial killer type of
publicly too. He wanted to leave bodies in the streets, and he wanted it to be on the he wanted it on the news. Phil said, one time Leonetti was really upset because the newspapers called him Crazy Phil, and he's telling he's telling his uncle Nicky. He says, "What did I do? Like, why are they calling me Crazy Phil?"
I want a better name.
Yeah, and Scarfo says, "Are you crazy? There's people who would kill for a name like that." Some of these guys were just their mind was tunnel vision, Cosa Nostra. They saw nothing outside of that. Didn't matter. It just was all about this life. And some of them were like, there were some of them that were willing to die for it. Like those guys who they rather take a bullet to the head to bring down Cosa Nostra. It came before Junior Gotti said that the family, him and his wife, and his mother and his sisters and Senior Gotti's family, they came second to Cosa Nostra for Gotti. That was what mattered, that was the thing that meant more than anything. That's the thing that you pledge your allegiance to.
I've always said when it comes to informants, I take every case and I analyze it. Every case, because I do think there are informants, like let's say Larry Mazza, for instance. Larry Mazza testified against Gregory Scarpa, and other people. But Greg Scarpa he didn't testify against Greg Scarpa, but Greg Scarpa was testifying basically and telling secrets about Larry Mazza. What if you found out your boss was diming you out? Look at John Martirano with Whitey Bulger. What if you found out for 20 years your boss, the guy that's been above you, has been, flapping his gums for the last 2 decades?
That's why I always try to tell people, you got to look at the whole picture. Don't just look at the guy on the stand. I mean, and I get pushback from this, but did you ever read the Gotti tapes, the book?
I've read so many Gotti books, I forget.
All of the stuff Gotti was on top of the Ravenite talking to Frankie.
Oh, yeah, right.
So if you look at, I mean, put yourself in Sammy's shoes when he's sitting there listening.
I don't agree. I know where you're going. I definitely don't agree. I don't agree with Sammy Gravano and his behavior. Like, Sammy Gravano ratted because he didn't want to go to jail. So this is a guy that was killing his own friends to take over their businesses. I'm going to tell you from him. He always puts out this. I ratted on John because John didn't tell him to kill certain people. He went out and did it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a confident way for him to just deflect, frankly.
I agree that he was just trying to save his skin. But when you listen to the tapes, man, I mean, when you're sitting there and you're listening to a guy who's your boss, a guy who's supposed to be your mentor, your friend, and he's talking about you that way. I mean, I read the whole thing.
Yeah, he said some stuff.
And Mikey Scar said this recently when he was talking, and he said that to him, there's no question that Gotti was lobbying Frankie Locascio to kill Sammy. That's Mikey Scar's. That's not my opinion.
Look at John and say, like, he probably said a lot of shit, like, just out of turn, and you didn't really. I always kind of came across with him, like, there were things that he would say on tape that were just like,
I will agree with that.
Just not really deal with it.
You make a good point there, because
one ear, not the other,
You make a good point there, because Gotti was known as just the guy who's just always, thrown up from the mouth. Yeah. And you know what? Because I have this in my book that's coming out, but Gotti loved Jackie D'Amico. He really did. Oh, yeah. He loved him to death. But he would talk, because so even on those same wiretaps, John Gotti is saying to Jackie D'Amico, this damn Jackie, that fucking cripple downstairs, I'm giving this guy $2,000 a week. I keep telling him, when are you going to take care of your fucking family? When are you going to get yourself together? And he's talking to Frankie, but he's killing Jackie, knows, talking to him, but he loved Jackie.
He did it to his own son. He called his son an imbecile many times.
He was, when he, Gotti found out that Junior Gotti, they put Quack Quack Ruggiero on the shelf.
Yeah.
And when you're on the shelf, no one can talk to you.
Yeah.
But Junior loved Quack Quack. It was a lifelong,
like
an uncle to him. And he wasn't, when they put you on the shelf in Cosa Nostra, that's when they're really mad at you. If Cosa Nostra respects you a little bit, they'll kill you. But when they're really mad, they just put you on the shelf.
Yeah, we're done with you.
It's like a slow death. But Quack Quack didn't have money to buy medicine. He was sick. He had no food. Junior was sneaking stuff over to Quack Quack. But when you're on the shelf, you're ostracized from the family. And Junior was
being Amish and leaving, right?
Yeah. So he would go. I mean, and sometimes I think he was even picking them up and giving them rides to the doctor and stuff. Like he loved them. And his dad found out. Senior found out that his son was talking to and communicating with Quack Quack, and he called everyone, the whole family and he had them all lined up, all the capos, all the powerhouses in the family. Pulled his son, Junior. He pulled Junior up front, ripped him a new ass in front of the whole family, and said, told him, I'm the boss of this family, and I gave an order, and who are you to defy my order? Quack,
That's
quack,
so interesting. You're bringing this up. It's so true, because even when John went away, you've seen those tapes where he's crushing the grandkid. Remember?
Mm-hmm. No,
you don't want to be I want to be a baseball player. To be a baseball player, you got to be a good liar.
You got to be a good. Yeah, I saw those.
Steroid.
You got to be a good. You must takes steroids, and
Yeah.
anyone that takes steroids is a trash pail.
I mean, you remember he's talking about the the Christmas picture or whatever, and he's like, I got people that think I'm a hero. This one girl from Utah, she wrote me a letter.
Yeah.
And it's always about him all the time. I'm the
You know-
boss. You do what I say, and if you don't fucking like it, and he will talk about people. He wasn't a good friend, probably.
But the one thing about Gotti, and I wish I could show, I have I have a huge portrait of the guys who I really respect because they pledged, it's right behind me, but they pledged an allegiance to this Cosa Nostra thing.
Yeah.
And, I believe that honor is defined by how loyal are you to what you pledged your allegiance to. I'm not a street guy, a mob guy, or nothing. I don't owe no allegiance to that. But I'm a professional. There's things that I want to do and succeed in life, and if I'm honorable in that, then you should judge me on that. But if I take the cheap route, if I do clickbait stuff where I get on YouTube and and fuck with people just to get views, you could call me, a dishonorable guy. You could call me, a scumbag and all these things. People who do that, like on my channel, I never try to attack people. I never try to be negative. I always try to be a positive guy. And if you watch me, you watch me. And if you don't watch me, you don't watch me. And so I look at like Gotti and some of those guys that way. He pledged his allegiance to Cosa Nostra. He swore an allegiance to this thing, and it's to death do us part. And he honored it the whole way through. So I think you make a good point when you say he always just threw up out of the mouth. If you really study Gotti, I think he knew the whole time he was going to die in jail and go to prison.
I think he had made that. Yeah, and I think a lot of those guys did. I mean, that. And that's one of the things about the real, in Italy, those guys are a whole different breed of gangster. They join the mafia like you join, a country club. It's your life. It's everything you do. It's your job. And you're going to die. That's what's going to happen. And you accept it like a man. And I think John and Giganti and Salerno and all these guys, this was their life. They had
his wife called him one day and said, "Where the hell you been? You haven't been home and blah, it's this 3 weeks or whatever, or a month or something." I don't know what it was. And she's mad. So Victoria's pissed at Gotti. And now he's being picked up because they're recording the call, and Gotti says, "I go on trial for this first case tomorrow. If I beat that one, I got this other one in 3 weeks from now. If I beat that case, I'll be home in 3 weeks. If I lose that case, I'll be home in 30 years." And he hangs up the phone on her, but it was so casual. Well, I'll be home in 30 years, babe. No thing. He used to say, I watched this great interview from John Jr. when he said his dad would say to him, he would watch other guys in the family, and he would say, and they're stacking up all this money, they're buying big houses.
He got planned. We're all going away.
Yeah. John Senior Gotti stayed in Howard Beach in that same little row home he was at before he was even the boss. He never even moved,
Gotti Jr. would say he hated money.
He hated money. He said, but he would look at these guys who were stacking up money and he would say, why are they saving money for? What do they have planned? At the end of the day, we're all going to die or go to jail, So
it's almost you almost got to look at it, and I think that's one of the things about John Gotti Sr. that I've always found to be very regal and respectful is that he never held no punches. That's who he was, right? There was no other way to this, and that's what I think the mob lost sight of. And they got too greedy. They let everybody in. And ultimately, it was a headless snake and you had it going all different ways. And it was too much to ever control. But that interview, the 60 Minutes interview is
beautiful.
Very well.
Man, done. John Jr., and I wish people gave him more credit, but he's brilliant, man.
Very smart guy.
He's very, very smart. He's a really great writer. I read his book, The Shadows of My Father. I've studied writing a lot. I've read all the great writers and stuff. He penned his book himself. He wrote a fascinating book, at least in the sense of it's very well written. He could be a full-time writer, but you know what? The idea even in Cosa Nostra, and I say this before, a gangster's paradise is to get out alive, get rich, and get out. You don't want to die miserable away from your family. It's sad as a guy like me who I love John Gotti because of his conviction to what he wanted to be. You can look at John Gotti and learn a lot. I look at him and say, if I want to be a best-selling author one day, if I want to be influential in this world and some, or do a good film, I'm working on some film stuff and stuff like that. If I want to, I have to be as dedicated as he was. So even though he was a mob guy, he teaches me. And that's why I hang his portrait in my house. And people come in here and they say, why the fuck do you have a picture of John Gotti up? But you can learn from a guy who's that dedicated to something. If you want to be great in life, it has to be everything to you. It has to come before everything. And if it doesn't, you're not going to be, the top of it. But when I look at Gotti, one of the things that I think about is, if you really respect him and love him, it has to hurt you to see how he died. You can't look at that and be, what a man. This guy was begging for a group picture of his grandkids. He was mad and he was yelling at Vicky. He was asking for pictures of people's homes. He just wanted to know where you lived and what your house looked like. And he was mad. I bought all these homes for, he didn't even know he wanted a picture of the house that his family lived in. He wanted pictures of his grandkids because he's living in this little box, 23-1, no quality of life. He died really sad. And if you love the guy or you respect the guy in some way, you can't look at that and think to yourself, yeah, that's great. I don't want to see nobody die like that. The last 10 years of his life, they weren't good.
But when we look back on him at like how he did everything, you have to look at it. Like I always go back to the quote of like in the film, the Gotti film, when he's in the coffee shop with Joe Armone, the Dominic Chianese character. He says to him, look at you, you went from a cockroach tenement to the cover of Time magazine, right? Like what he did was pretty incredible, right? You went from a nothing. Nothing. 10 kids or whatever it was. You systematically went from this to this to this, and you took what you wanted.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'll say, and then we'll get out of here. The one thing about Gotti that we have to point out, and I'm going to say it, he is one of the most overrated mob figures of all time. Okay?
You know what's funny, bro? I'm glad you brought that up.
He didn't enhance the mob in any way. The only thing he did was enhance it. I guess the opposite of enhance, right? What would that be? He softened the effectiveness of the mob by, doing some of the things.
He has this like folk hero stature. Like if you ask a casual person about the mob, they mention two names to you: Al Capone, John Gotti. But if you're historically inclined, if you're historically briefed, where you know the history, John Gotti, the truth of the matter is he's very well known and very publicized. He has a major name, a major face, but he didn't advance the Gambino family. He didn't.
He wasn't a visionary.
No, he did. I think he knew that the end was near, and I think he basked in the allure of being the boss. He didn't do anything to try to deny he was the boss. I think he wanted people to know he was the boss. But if you want to make a list of 20 great bosses in Cosa Nostra history, you can't put them on there.
No,
not
that's
even.
What I was going to bring up. It's but even if you look at, let's say you bring up 50, right? 50 people in the mob, like I'm not putting him ahead of Jimmy Burke. I'm not putting him ahead of there were people in his own family that were Jimmy Brown Fiala. I mean, he did a lot of shit, man.
I did a video. I got a video on my page on him. He was, the Genoveses were backing Jimmy Brown, liked Jimmy Brown, had a close relationship with Chin Gigante.
They were right at the end.
Huh?
Chin was right in the end on John Gotti. He had him pegged from the beginning.
Yeah, Gotti was too much about Gotti, but not Cosa Nostra. Now, I heard the wiretaps where he wanted this, like he said before, if you give me 3 or 4, and this is why I think he knew it wasn't going to be, like, he knew his fate was sealed. And one of the fascinating thing I heard him say, he said, if I can just get 3 or 4 years, I'm going to put this thing together so tight, they'll never be able to break it. Talking about Cosa Nostra. He said, if I can get 3 or 4 years uninterrupted, meaning not get indicted, not get arrested, just 3 or 4 he was asking for it. Just give me 3 or 4 years uninterrupted. It almost sounds like a U.S. president. If I can just get 2 terms, I'm going to fix this whole country. It's like not making long-term plans. He said, just give me 3 or 4 uninterrupted years and I'll put Cosa Nostra together so tight they'll never beat and break it, even if we die. So to me, it sounded like, if I can get 4 years, fine. I'll go to jail for life. Kill me. Cosa Nostra. But so it seemed like a part of his subconscious mind loved Cosa Nostra, wanted to have it be here for a long time. But the way he led, my research on him looks like he led on it was about him. Me. He did really silly things. He brought the character from The Godfather into the Ravenite, man. It had him juggling in the back. Like it's crazy. Like, Gianni.
Really? Who is that? Johnny Russo?
Well, Gianni Russo brought who's the guy that played Michael Corleone? No. I mean, Vito. Who played Vito again?
Marlon Brando.
Brought Marlon Brando in. They're in the back juggling and laughing and acting out scenes from The Godfather.
It's funny because Capone used to do the same stuff, weirdly enough.
Yeah, this is crazy. What kind of mob boss brings in so it was like the real life Godfather and the biggest fake Godfather. And Gianni is in the back like, we gotta go, Marlon. It's crazy, man. Gotti did some strange things, man. Like,
2 questions.
And check this out. Last thing I'll say. As Gianni and Marlon's leaving, Gotti always hated Gianni Russo, and Gianni Russo didn't care for Gotti. He hates Gotti. As Gianni Russo and is leaving with Marlon, Gotti comes out to the front door and says, "Hey, Gianni, thank you, man. I really appreciate that," because he really enjoyed being in the back with Vito Corleone. Like it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
No, it's fascinating. He was a fascinating guy. I'll ask you 2 questions and then we'll go. By the way, comment in here, very, very good one. Elvin, did John Gotti ever pull a trigger? Look, everyone will tell you, like even one of the commenters said, of course he did. Look, for one, I value the research I've done on this, and I'm not just doing the read the Wikipedia stuff. Like, I'm looking deep into this. As far as I know, there is no legit proof that he killed anyone. Now, was he around and at killings? Sure. If you look into Vito Borelli, the individual that made fun of Paul Castellano, the boyfriend of his daughter, who insulted him, it was said that he was at that hit, but Joe Massino actually pulled the trigger, as far as I know. People also bring up that he was at the Tommy DeSimone. I'm not buying that. That was Tommy Aggro, as far as I'm concerned. Could he have?
You know what, though, man?
Maybe.
If I had to answer that question, I would say yes. And again, you never know, but I think Gotti's ego alone, being a part of Cosa Nostra, he would want to be able to say, yeah, I did that before. I honestly think
he never has.
Yeah, I think he would want that under that notch under his belt. I think they now who pulled the trigger? He didn't pull the trigger on the McBratney thing.
No, it was Gallon.
Yeah, he didn't pull the trigger for McBratney. And they say he came out of when he escaped, well, not escaped, but was being transported and then killed somebody while he was in jail on the Bratney. No, he was in prison doing the Bratney hit, and then he kind of got out and did some kind of work. And I heard about the Tommy DeSimone from Goodfellas, that he was the guy that pulled the trigger. Henry Hill actually said, I watched the interview where Henry Hill said that from what he was told, he said he was told that Gotti pulled the trigger on that. I watched Henry Hill actually say that Gotti pulled the trigger.
Yeah, again, I mean,
I got
we
2
never
Henry
know.
Hill paintings. You know what's funny? You know, Henry Hill became a painter after he ratted.
Mhm.
I got 2 of his paintings hanging right in front
Oh,
of me.
really?
You want to see them?
Yeah, I would love to.
Hang on. Hope my doesn't cut out, but check this out. Can you see them?
The ones above Jay-Z?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. They're actually his? No shit.
Those are real life Henry Hill paintings.
That's pretty awesome. You know who else paints? You know who else paints? Tommy Patera in prison is a big painter.
Oh, okay, yeah. So when Henry Hill got out, so you got to think. See, nowadays guys, when they rap, just get a YouTube channel and make money. But before, it was different. So you got to find a way to make money. He started this mobart.com.
I never knew that, actually.
Yeah, he started this mob art eBay page on eBay. And he was painting. So those are the 2 classic scenes. My 2 favorite scenes from Goodfellas. That first one, this first one right here is the scene where they killed Billy Batts. That one there.
Right. Yeah.
That's all of them at the bar. And this one here is when they threw the guy over the bridge in Tampa. The Tampa Zoo.
With the Lions. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that's the other one I was telling you about right here. This is see that one?
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So but yeah, that I know.
Hey, where'd you get that picture? Park City?
I don't that was a gift to me.
A guy, he had one of those little stands in the middle.
I got my whole house, bro. Yeah. I got so many of his paintings. I got
Chinese guy, right?
Yeah, but he's not there no more.
No, he was awesome.
He was
used
great.
To make the white shirts with the black portraits on them.
Yeah.
I still have in my bedroom 2 of those. He did a colored Allen Iverson one. I loved Allen Iverson when I was a kid, and a Gotti one. It was the one where Gotti's sitting at the trial. It's like the regal look. Like that guy was awesome. He had some great paintings.
Yeah. I bought. If I went through my house, I got portraits hanging everywhere. But that guy painted. I mean, he sketched a lot of my paintings.
Yeah, that guy was good, man.
Yeah, those Henry Hill ones, and people say you have a rat hanging in your house. But
I mean, it's kind of cool, I guess.
When you look at the history of things, if you really look at the history, you have a different way you look at everything. The rat is even a part of this whole history, everything. So, and Henry Hill he says, listen, I would have took 2 bullets in the head. I'd have did life in prison. When they went after my wife, he said that's when the gloves were off. They tried to get Roy DeMeo's crew to go after his wife. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that, it's all they all have a story. They all play a piece.
Exactly. That's what I said. They all have Fat Peter Chiodo, for instance. Look into his story. Fat Peter Chiodo was Anthony Castro tried to have him killed, shot him 12 times, I think. Then went after his sister and tried to kill her.
Yeah.
And he said, fuck this. I'm ratting. Like, I'm not going to, these people are lunatics. So every situation is different. Let me ask you, are you surprised? And I mean, think about this for a second. Are you surprised that a mobster never ran for public office? Because they would get votes.
I think they have in Sicily, though.
Sure they have.
They say that. Yeah, not here, but I know there was a guy who was the mayor of Palermo who ran a lot of the politicking in Sicily. Some suspect that, forget his name, but some suspect that he was actually the head of the honored society over in Sicily. But that's interesting.
I guess in the heyday of the mob.
Yeah, but actually, I am kind of. That's a great question. I would have thought back in. You got to find the right candidate, of course, but yeah, that would have been interesting.
Frank Costello.
Yeah, Tommy Gambino, NYU graduate. Want to ran. He was a legitimate businessman. I tried to reach out to some.
Look at the guy, Anthony Scotto. He just died. He was a big union guy with the Gambino family. He was very connected with politics. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, that would have been, they tried to buy them and control them. I really believe, people might call me a crazy conspiracy theorist, but I do believe that they were behind the JFK. There's no question in my mind.
RJ,
There's no question. If you look at it's not even up for debate. If you look at the history, if you look at all the facts, they killed him. Jack Ruby was deeply connected to the New Orleans family who killed. Yeah,
Marcello put it in. He was the brains, the master. Sure.
There's no question. Even Oswald had connections into the New Orleans family.
Oswald, look, I want to make this clear. Okay? I don't believe Lee Harvey Oswald was the only shooter.
No.
In fact, I think the shooter, there were multiple shooters. I also believe RFK wasn't killed by Sirhan Sirhan. I don't think it's possible. Marilyn Monroe was killed by the mob.
Absolutely. They killed Marilyn. I think that I believe, and that's why I try to explain to people, if you're historically briefed on Cosa Nostra, it's hard for you to look at what's going on today and say that it's as powerful as it used to be. So like when people say this, I say, do people know what they used to? My favorite line in The Irishman, was when the Pesci character, I forget his
Buffalino.
Yeah. He's talking to Frank Sheeran character, and he says, Frank, if they can kill the president of a union. No. He says, if they can kill a president, they can kill the president of a union. These guys were so big at the time. You know, Jack Ruby walked into the back door of the police department when he shot Oswald. Mm-hmm. How do you just walk into a police department with a gun and on top of that, get within 3 feet?
Well, it's also conceivable to think that not only did the mob do it, but the CIA knew about it.
Oh, man, it was all.
They tried to kill Fidel Castro. They went to
Meyer Lansky and
Fidel Castro.
Absolutely.
But you look back on Cuba, it's a shame that the mob wasn't able to eliminate Castro because they would have did a lot of good in Cuba. You would have had 40, 50 years of no Castro regime.
They tried, when everyone flew out of Cuba because of Batista was in exile.
Yeah.
And Castro was taking over. You know who stayed behind? Santo Trafficante. He stayed behind thinking he could broker some kind of deal. He stayed. He didn't leave like everyone else did because all his money was invested over there with Lansky and all those guys. Yeah. But they say that Meyer Lansky was more powerful than Fulgencio Batista was in Cuba. I mean, the mob controlled. The mob was more. The mob was more powerful than the Cuban government when Fulgencio Batista was in there.
Meyer Lansky literally went in there and said, "Look, to the current president, here's $200,000. Go the fuck away. We want our guy in here." And Batista was their guy.
And if you go into the history, it's fascinating. That's why I say these guys should be studied in universities. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were laundering money in the fucking Vatican. The Vatican. Tony. Was it the guy from Chicago that they were funneling his money into the Vatican? I mean,
it may have been Tony Accardo. I don't know much. I get to look into that. I don't know.
They were washing their money in the Vatican. They were doing money laundering schemes for the Iranians. I mean, the mob was big. I mean, people don't realize how big they were. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why it's almost disrespectful to talk about what's going on today and say it's all the same.
The country. They shaped the country.
These people, to me, they are the most fascinating people to research. I mean, there's groups that are powerful that are conspiracy theory groups, like the people talk about. But these are ultra rich people with Oxford, England educations, Harvard educations. People don't even think about when the Sicilians came over. A lot of these people spoke broken English, had no power base, 4th, 5th grade education. You know, Frank Costello's mom snuck him into this country in a cooking pot, big cooking pot. She put him in, put a lid on it, and that's how she got him in. These people could hardly even speak clear English, and they still developed. You know, Meyer Lansky famously said that we're bigger than U.S. Steel. They were. They were the biggest corporation in the country. They had billions.
And you look at the current state of it.
Come on.
There are guys on YouTube talking about it. Let me ask you. I have one question, then I have an interesting thing that I guarantee you did not know about Lancaster that I'm going to tell you about. And it relates to the mob. Answer this. I always ask guests whenever I speak to them. I need from history one boss, one hitter, and one earner. If you could build your family, a perfect family, who's your hitter, your money maker, and who's your boss?
Hitter, money maker, boss.
Yes.
Okay. Like you mean like someone who goes out on a job, a shooter?
Yeah, like you need someone killed. Your enforcer.
All right, hitter.
And if you want to pick an informant, you're welcome to. And the chat's welcome to answer as well.
As far as a hitter, I'd probably say
maybe he'll pick before Thanksgiving, guys.
Off the top of my head, without thinking too far into it, I'd probably go Sammy, actually.
Sammy Gravano.
Sammy was behind a lot of hits. I mean, as far as like organizing them and stuff like that, he was he was involved with multiple family wars. The Columbos, he was with them. He helped them in their situation. He helped out in the Philadelphia problems that they were having over there. He was organizing hits in Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
and the Gambinos. And he wasn't just killing anybody's. It was some important people who he was behind. So off the top of my head, without thinking, I'm gonna throw out Sammy. That might be a cheesy answer, but I'm gonna say Sammy.
No, at his height, he was a good hitter. I mean, he's kind of on that level of Greg Scarpa, Patera. Sure, we look down on him because he informed, obviously, but he definitely killed people and knew what he was doing.
Moneymaker.
See, I only think there's one answer here, always, but
who?
Salerno.
Oh, that's a good one.
He literally made billions of dollars in his life. I mean,
you know what? I didn't even really consider a fact.
I mean, it's crazy. Like he was making in the 60s like $200 million a year only off like numbers rackets.
Yeah.
That didn't even count the construction. And
I was leaning Costello.
That's a good one.
Costello was making a lot of money. They had a lot of, and see, they were making, the Luciano outfit made $11 million before there was even a 5-family set up. Yeah, they were still called an outfit, the Luciano outfit, before Maranzano changed it from gang and clan to family in 31. Luciano was getting so big, $11 million back then in 27, 28. That's hundreds of millions of dollars in today's money. I mean, they were big earners, real big earners. Best boss, that's always tough. People always ask me that. I think Lucky Luciano always, because he instituted the commission. If he did nothing else, he's the guy that put together the commission. The 5 families was set up by Maranzano, but the commission was set up by Luciano. The commission brought about like 30 or 40 years of peace. It revolutionized the underworld, where before the commission, it was like cowboy country, just killing everybody, and then it became this voting system where hits had to be approved. People had to be, of course, there was outliers, but the commission from 30 all the way up until pretty much the time Valachi testified, the underworld was it was very well regulated. Mm-hmm. It was kind of peaceful. It wasn't like bodies all over the place. It was very regulated. So I always go Lucky Luciano.
It's not a bad answer. I mean, it'd be right there for me. I've always said I'll go Accardo. I think he's a perfect boss. But real quick, have you ever heard the story about Salerno and Michael Franzese? Did you ever hear that story?
Yes, when about the 2 Mamalukes that needed $500.
He goes, hey, just give me the money and give them $500.
$500.
Yeah, it's great. That's a great story.
I like
Tony. Real quick, you heard it. So this is real random, but so for anyone that doesn't know, we have a mall in our town, and on Sunday there was a shooting inside the mall. I've heard about that.
Yeah.
So I did a little research. Do you know the last shooting at that mall? Do you know what it had to do with? A lot of people believe it involved 4 individuals that were all Italian. And there was, quote, from the 1984 Intelligencer Journal, there was a lot of mob ties with these people. A lot
With
of
the
mob.
Intelligencer Journal?
No, with the individuals in the shooting.
Oh.
I'll have to send you the article. I found it in the Intelligencer Journal. They did some background on these guys. They own these pizzerias inside the mall. It's called Italian Delight. And they were connected in New Jersey to some mobsters in New Jersey. And I also did a little research that the Buffalino crime family, which was up in northeastern Pennsylvania, had a lot of connection down here in this area.
Oh,
They
yeah.
had some mob-owned restaurants, bookmakers, all sorts of things. So I've done a little research on this area. Not a big mob presence, but I found that interesting, that mall shooting. It was these 4 Italian guys that someone owed somebody money, and the paper didn't know how to report it. They just kept saying there was connections to organized crime, and then they did an article about the actual connections. So
yeah,
kind of interesting. RJ, I could probably do this for another 3 or 4 hours. We probably have to get off eventually. It seemed like people like the show, and we'll definitely get this out, and people will enjoy it. Do yourself a favor. Let us know where we can find you, what you have going on, where we can expect, and when we can expect videos. I think you do some great videos. You do it, again, from like a theory-based kind of thought. So we'll have to do this again, but let us know where we can find you.
So I do a show every Saturday. I try to do it every Saturday around 3 o'clock on Black Handprint Mafia, if anyone wants to subscribe. And I try to not just make it about like regurgitating like a historical event. I try to look at history. Sometimes people, I mean, it's so crazy. Like some of the comments that I get, it's like, I don't have a dog in the race. Like, and I like to open up to present videos that create discussion. But some people get very angry, very mad. And I always think, so what I try to do is create videos. I look at history and try to come up with some like a theory-based show. So I'll look at like, all right, John, like, so I did a video on Faela and John Gotti. So I'm not saying it's 100. I mean, I'm looking at it and presenting a theory. What do you think? And so he was a powerful couple in the family, and Gotti's going to jail when the family's, and Sammy just ratted. It put the family in limbo, and so I try to look at history and do theory-based presentations, come up with an idea, talk about it, throw it out there, and I believe it. I'm not just bullshitting. And then I like to just, I learn a lot in the comment section. So every Saturday, usually around 3 o'clock, I try to put out one show a week. I just started doing that a couple months ago. I was kind of surprised how fast people picked up on it. I hit like 1,200 subscribers.
You're already up to it, yeah.
I think I had like 1,200 subscribers and like 75,000 views or something in like 2 months on like 12, 13 videos. It wasn't very many videos I put out. So people seem to like it. And the idea I had, people make fun of my office. I live in a nice home. It's nice. But the only room in my house that I never touched was my office where I film my show out of. And I write all over the walls with inspirational quotes. So you see all these markings on my wall and all these books. And that's really where I sit at night. I read books and I write on my walls. I had a contractor I had someone in that was painting my house. And I just took his paintbrush and I put a big red heart on the middle of my wall.
It's a room that you're not going to touch. Look, I'll tell you this again. The clean desk is a sign of a sick mind.
Exactly.
Now, it's funny.
You
should see my desk.
Yeah, well,
everything in my house is spotless. So
to
show you how my mind
so I sit in there and I read and stuff like that. So I read all these books all the time, and my producer, who's helping me with my book, said, "Hey, why don't you set up a YouTube channel and just tell mob stories?" And I said, "Oh, okay, whatever." And I just did it, not really having a big plan for it, but people seem to like it. I'm not sure how long I'll do it, but so far I kind of enjoy it. So other than that, I'm writing. I just finished my 4th book, The Don, 36 Rules of the Bosses. Again, it's in its 2nd stage of editing, and we're hoping to have it out late 3rd quarter or early second quarter next year. Again, so what it is so the olive branch right here is my second book that I published. This book is being republished as The Don. Has 6 additional chapters. So I'm working on that. I'm doing some film work. I'm writing a screenplay for a prospective film. So those are 2 biggest things I'm working on, and there's a bunch of different things but if anyone wants to look at what I'm doing, day to day, my show on Black Handprint Mafia on my YouTube channel. And if you see something that you don't like, leave a comment. We don't have to hate each other. You can tell me anything you want. You can disagree. We can be friends. You don't have to unsubscribe or block me. I never blocked anybody. I got some terrible comments. And my goal is to never block a single person, no matter what they say. Because I believe in what I say, I shouldn't have to block a comment. So sometimes they're bad, but I let them live. I let them stay on.
Some of the other content creators should take this advice.
Yeah, I don't block
naming
people.
Any names.
Everyone you block is just one less person to watch. You're hurting yourself. It's like banning someone to come into your store to buy milk. It's like, I just try to be kind to people. I wish people were a little kinder sometimes. I'm a gentleman. I try to always conduct myself as a gentleman, no matter what happens. I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. So I wish it could just be like a discussion forum.
Can you before we wrap up, you gotta do something for me. You gotta tell the users when I emailed you your intentions initially.
Okay.
And why?
Well, okay, I'll be honest with you. And I wasn't appearing on anybody, and I get a lot of people who reach out to me to appear on the shows. And at this point, I wasn't planning on doing any appearances. So for you to get me on here, it's special because I wasn't going to do your show. So I got your email, and I want to live just a peaceful life. This stuff, I don't think anybody gets into this to start problems, to be fighting, to have to look over their shoulder. When some of the stuff I see where people want to fight each other and they want to drive and I think, wow, that's very sad, because I wouldn't want to be in it if it came down to me having to worry about my family, to worry about my safety. We're just talking about history. Like, it shouldn't have to be that serious. So I steer clear of anything that's negative. I live a positive life. I want to do good in my life. I want good people in my life. And I think life is easiest to live when you're doing the right thing and you're being positive and you stay around good company. So when you emailed me, I only ever saw you one time. I saw you on a show once where you were kind of going back and forth it was like a big fight and all this, and all this drama and negativity. And
He's talking about the Lee Cole show when Lee came on with Sicilian and I. Yeah, I remember that.
So for me, it wasn't a judgment on you or a judgment on Lee or a judgment on Sicilian. I love everybody. I just don't want to argue.
Yeah, you don't want it. I got you.
I just want to be a positive guy and live a positive life. I don't want negativity in my life. So I kind of shy. Again, it's no judgment. It's just, I just want to live positive, and I want positive energy. And negative energy it really just brings you down. You don't listen. I've had shows I put out, and I'll be honest about this. I'll get 200 comments, 199. What a great show.
Yeah.
You're so fantastic. I'm so happy I found your channel. I'll get one comment. Fuck you. You're black. Who are you to talk about the Italians? Stick to your own people. Blah, 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 blah. And bro, I never thought that stuff would get to me. That shit would keep me up.
Yeah.
I'd be in bed like, how could he say that to me? So one negative comment, sometimes the wrong type of comment, it can really wear
Sets
on
you
you.
off, you know.
It can really and I didn't think that kind of stuff bothered people, but there's been things said to me that kind of bothered me at times. And so I always let it go. I don't even block them. And I still write back. If you go on all the comments are there. I'll write back to a guy like that and say, hey, thank you for watching. I'm sorry you feel that way. Please continue to, share your thoughts and opinions, even if you don't.
Kindness.
Yeah, so I just don't take a negative approach to life. I have found, I went through mental health things at a time, and I have learned the value of positive thinking. I've learned the value of keeping your mind in an elevated position. I read this quote before that said, there's more power shown in restraint than there is in reaction. So someone says something to you, and now you want to, let's go. That's not lack of self-control is showing a lot of who you are. That's not power to call somebody, come on, let's go. The strong man isn't the guy who puts his fist up. The strong man is the guy who knows he can beat you, but he walks away anyway. To live to fight another day. Look who's laughing. Look who's laughing now. That's the theory. Live. We get one life. You don't want to go to jail, die. I mean, every second of the day, you're dying. Every second.
You really want to go to jail over that guy? Yeah.
It's not worth it. Like, we want to see our kids on the beach. We want to have a nice meal with our family. Get some pussy, whatever whatever your thing is.
Sure.
We all want to just live a good life. And nobody wants to be in negativity. Nobody. I don't care who says it. Anybody who's sucked into a drama-filled negative life, I promise you, they don't admit it, but they don't feel good inside. Right. They have anxiety. They don't sleep well at night. They're antsy. They're worried. It's not worth it. It's not for what? To talk about the mafia? Mm-hmm. I like talking about the mob. I like eating pizza, and I like drinking a cold beer. It ain't that serious to me, Yeah.
Well, listen, we're glad you chose to come on. We're glad you're here. Go check out Black Handprint Mafia. Great channel. I love the videos. I love the thought behind them. Thanks everybody for listening. As always, it's funny. We said we were going to go on for 40 minutes. We're here for 2 hours. So that's when him and I talk. This is what happens. We just go off on crazy tangents. Thanks again, RJ.
Listen, bro.
We'll look to talk to you again real soon.
Hey, I thank you. I appreciate you for inviting me on, even though I wasn't originally going to come on. But hey, I respect everything that you're doing. You seem like a gentleman. I'm proud to see you growing in your world, your sports world, and your YouTube channel world. And if I can ever give you some advice, anybody some advice, stay the course. Focused people get to where they want to go. Just keep your eye on the prize. Don't get sidetracked. Know where you want. You can't go if you don't know where you're going. So, just stay the course. And that's what I try to do. And
I always have a method to all my madness. Everything I do,
Yeah.
We'll just end it on this. The one thing I'll say, that little tussle you saw me in wasn't great for me. I stood on my laurels there. I have behaved a certain way, and I expect others. I know they don't always behave that way. But you know what? It was 4,000 people that saw me that never saw me. Maybe they never saw me before. All publicity is good at the end of the day. So I'll take it. Thank you for coming on. You're the best. Great talking to you. Make sure, again, you go check out Black Handprint Mafia. You all better do that. We'll talk to you again soon, RJ. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, bro. We'll talk soon.
Yep. Thank you, guys. And make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.